April Martin, and I'm primarily a prop maker, and let me give you a little bit of background in terms of me in 3D. I went to the Art Institute of Dallas for a bit because I wanted to be a game developer, and then they squashed my dreams, and I went into debt. So I left after that. However, I met my boyfriend there, and he's like a legit game developer, specifically a 3D modeler. And I just have to say, he works at Rooster Teeth now, working on Ruby as a 3D modeler, so woot. But he taught me how to 3D model, and we started 3D printing about 2 years ago. And I use it in probably about half of the props I make right now. And yeah, when it comes to using 3D, it's really good for, of course, printing objects. And when it comes to those objects, they can be both organic or mechanical in nature. I've done, when it comes to organic stuff, I like to do it in ZBrush, and I've done some helmets and a goblet recently from Dark Souls. It's very organic looking. And then when it comes to mechanical stuff, it's really nice because it helps you get those nice, flat, hard edges. And you can see right here, this is the very first thing that I ever 3D printed on my own poly printer, was the Diva pistol, which my boyfriend modeled for me in ZBrush, right after the images came out that they released for Overwatch last year. And then there's also Pepakura, which I don't know if anybody's heard about. It's an older technique, and that's honestly how I got into prop making. Probably about 8 years ago, I discovered the 405th, which is the Halo community, and I ended up making text for Red versus Blue. And Pepakura can be a good starting point in terms of 3D and prop and armor making, and I'll go ahead and cover that more. And then the last really good reason for using 3D is for turnarounds and references, because sometimes you only see certain angles of characters, or they'll have a really intricate design on them that you can't really see as they're walking around, or the textures will be really bad in-game. And sometimes in games, when you see the really pretty rendered videos, those models are not on those discs. That's all pre-rendered. So those are just videos, AVIs that are on the disc, and the actual models and textures that are in-game that you can rip are much lower quality. So, but sometimes they help. Cool. I'm gonna be going over basically what I went through when it came time for me to buy a 3D printer. For probably about 6 or 7 months, I used the printing service of Shapeways. And Shapeways is cool, but it can be expensive. The nice thing about Shapeways is they've got a multitude of different printing techniques and materials. They can do ceramics, they can do metals, they can do color printing, they can do the powder printing, which is where they have like this big bed of powder, and they lay down an adhesive and then lay down the powder, and they just keep going back and forth, and it means there's not really any print striations on it when you're done, so it's a lot easier to clean up, but it can be incredibly expensive too, and it is solid. So it's got a lot of weight to it. But when I finally decided to buy my own printer, there was the cost, because printers can range anywhere from $200 to several grand, depending on which features you want. There's the community. Some of the printers have a lot of people that talk to each other and go over like how it breaks, how you can fix it, all those little things, because printers break. They will break, things will break off of them, you'll have misprints, you'll wake up in the morning and find spaghetti and just be like, that was 20 hours, but whatever. There's the upkeep to think about. How often do you have to change up the filament, redo the bed, like whether you do tape or the liquids, or change out the parts or oil everything. Size is a big thing. Some printers that are cheaper ones will have a tiny print bed, maybe 4 or 5 inches. Mine is 9x9 with a height of 16 inches. Some printers can't print in every single material. I feel lucky that mine can print in most materials. However, there are some that are better in just printing just PLA, and then there are others that you can do with ABS, which is my favorite, and that just really depends on if it's got a heated bed and if it's enclosed, because ABS prefers a nice, dark, hot, warm cave to sit in, basically. And heated bed can be important depending on the material, the enclosed printer space, and then if it's upgradable. Because some of the cheaper ones, you can actually like put it together yourself, print off new parts, add it to it, just make it a better printer. But it's one of those printers that you're not gonna just open it up out of the box and use it. You're gonna have to work on it yourself. And if you don't want to buy your own printer, which is perfectly fine, like maybe you only need one thing printed a month or a year year or something. You can go to Makerspace. You can find a friend that has it. I'm sure everybody eventually will have a friend with at least one printer. Shapeways plus other online printing services. A lot of libraries now actually have printers of some sort. I know friends that have gone to libraries to have props printed, and then a lot of colleges and even high schools now have their own 3D printers that you can use if you're enrolled. Okay, printers. I went ahead, and this is like more of my research. The printer featured in the right-hand corner is the printer that I ended up deciding on. It is a Poly Printer 229. It is an enclosed printer. It comes with a little webcam right there in the corner, so I can hook it up and I can be in a different room and watch my print and be like, oh, well, it messed up. Let me go change some stuff out. Or I can probably just put it on Twitch and just have people watch stuff print as I'm like sleeping or something. That's how I'm gonna get views, right there. But the thing that made me pick this printer in particular is I'm from Dallas. And this printer is an indie printer that's made specifically at the Makerspace in Dallas by a very small group of people. They've made maybe about 500 to 1,000 of these printers, but you will find them in a lot of the schools and libraries and colleges up in Dallas. And a lot of like the black and the blue and the yellow pieces on here are printed by prior printers that they've made. So you've got like an assembly line going on right there. But they also make a bigger version of it that's like double the size in terms of the print bed. And I also picked it because a lot of the prop makers that I look up to and that I'm friends with also have a poly printer. And of course it's messed up on occasion, but it's one of the best ones that I've found personally, and I love it. Of course it is over $1,000. So it was a big business investment. And of course, I have a business, and so I wanted something that would work in the long run and help me, and that's why I invested a lot of money in it. But if you're just looking for something hobbyist, or like printing smaller things, there's the XYZ Printing Da Vinci. Oh, you're gonna say no on that one?
I was gonna tell you to cross it off.
Okay, well I did this, I think last year, and I haven't updated it, so there could be some different opinions going on out there, so that's perfectly fine. Okay. I looked up the M3D micro, and I had a couple friends that did that one, and I believe there was like a Kickstarter for that one, and it was like this really cute little box, and it could do fairly okay printing, so it wasn't that bad. And I've heard some good things about the Solid Doodle as well. And then as you're getting more expensive, I know the MakerBot's got a big community, the Da Vinci and Dreammaker, and then you're getting into the couple grand, which is the Poly Printer, which I have, the Ultimaker, and the Formlabs. And I believe the Formlabs is the extrusion, not the extrusion one, but it's the, the resin one, which I would love to use one day just for the resolution, but we'll see what happens.
You actually just finished a Kickstarter for a resin printer.
Really?
That was like, that's been my first printer. And it cost me $400.
Really?
Yeah,
that's it?
really cheap. Another thing is keep it closed.
Yeah.
Cool. I will have to look into that because I feel like I do a lot of very high poly modeling, especially in ZBrush, and a lot of the times when it comes time for me to get it ready for printing, I have to drop the poly count substantially from like millions to maybe hundreds of thousands just for my slicer to be okay with it, and even my printer to register what's going on. So I would love to have something print in such a high resolution just to get that amazing detail. Cool. So when it comes to printing, there's like the two big printing materials are ABS and PLA. I'm primarily an ABS user. It's what came with my printer, and I haven't done anything else with it, or I haven't tried any other materials yet. But ABS is petroleum-based. What I love about it is it's soluble in acetone, and so I love using acetone cement or acetone slurry. So like I'll print something off, and it always comes with support pieces on the print piece, because as it prints, it's gonna there's pieces that hang over, and you don't want the plastic to like droop as it dries, and so they have the support pieces, and when it's done printing, you break those off, and I like cutting them apart, putting them in a glass bowl, and putting acetone until they dissolve, and it becomes like this thick, gooey mess. But then I use that to attach pieces to each other so it becomes a solid piece. And I've accidentally attached pieces incorrectly to the point that I've had to like take a hammer to knock these two pieces apart. Like this is the way this sword is attached. It was printed in 12 separate pieces of ABS. And then I did acetone slurry. So I could probably drop kick this thing and the paint would suffer, but the actual like structure, it wouldn't pop apart. So that's what I love about ABS. One thing is it's also got a higher temperature resistance. I believe if anybody follows Bill Doran of Published Props, he recently posted a video of one of his Destiny guns getting heated up. I believe it was a PLA gun, and that's one reason it warped in the heat. So that's another reason I prefer ABS, especially being here in Texas, and you end up leaving stuff in cars. So I find it easier to sand, although it does have a hot plastic smell while you print it, which is one thing I love about having the enclosed lid for my printer. Plus, I have a craft room, so I can just leave the room while it's printed, thankfully, and open a window. And it's also best for being used on a heated print bed. It loves heat, it needs it. When it comes to PLA, it is a plant-based thermoplastic made out of beets, potatoes, and corn. It's more rigid, has a lower printing or melting point, so you don't need an enclosure for it. And I've heard it has a sugary smell during printing, which I guess is better than a plastic smell. It says it can be less prone to warping while it prints. Some of the other materials you can print in include nylon, resins, metals, ceramics, gypsum. It just really depends on what kind of printer you have. I know that when I first got my poly printer, the guys actually displayed, it was like a silicone printing for me, and they made like this squishy wallet thing, which was really cool. But because it's not like plastic or resin based, you can't sand it, and you're stuck with those print striations still. Boop. Cool. So when it comes to 3D, sometimes it helps, to actually know how to model. There are ways that you can get these models. Like Thingiverse is a great place to pick up free models. Usually a lot of them are ready for print. Some of them aren't that great, but you get what you pay for, really. You can have people model for you, you can pay them, or you can learn how to model yourself. One of my favorite programs so far has been Fusion 360. It's like a CAD-based program, and it's what the Luca pistol right here was modeled in. That was actually my very first model that I did in that program. And it's different from doing like Maya or ZBrush in the fact that you can just kind of collide pieces together, which is really nice, and get those nice hard mechanical shapes. Blender is a free program, and Blender is interesting because it has a UI that takes a lot of work to really understand and get through, but they've got so many amazing plugins that it can be just as powerful as any other multi-$1,000 program out there. I know that there are some game studios that make stuff using Blender. There's Daz Studio, which I've unfortunately never used, Autodesk 123D, which I think might be more of a CAD-based program, 3D Crafter, SketchUp, Wings 3D, and Sculptress. And Sculptress is like the little cousin to ZBrush. It's a organic kind of program, so instead of you taking like hard shapes and creating them, you can make like organic pieces, like the goblet right here with this skull and everything. And all those programs are free right here. These are not. There's 3ds Max, which is, I guess, the power horse of the game industry. Everybody uses it. And then ZBrush, again, is the organic kind of sculpting program, really good for creatures and cloth and stuff. Both of these can cost thousands of dollars a year, or I think they have a program that you can pay a couple hundred every couple months or something. It's really, which one?
3ds Max, Maya, and Mudbox are all Autodesk. Let's say if you're a student or imply that you're a student, you just put your email, put any school, you put, and you'll get free years.
Really? I didn't know that.
And after 3 years, you're like, oh, put another email address. And
okay. Well, you can do that, cough, if you need to. And again, there's Mudbox that people also use too. Okay, this is kind of just going through, I guess, my process in terms of how I do it. Some people do it differently. Some people use different programs, different methods. But like I said, my favorite program is ZBrush. And so I'll go ahead and model it up in ZBrush. And then I go ahead and take it into the program NetFab, which allows me to cut the model into sections because my print bed is only 9x9. And so I'll chop it up into sections, and I usually like to have things lay flat, so I'll usually do a cut right through the center too, because I don't like a lot of support structure on it. And it also allows me to size things a lot better because ZBrush is weird in the fact that I've always had a problem sizing things for IRL in ZBrush, and so I prefer to do it in NetFab, which is, I think there's a free version of NetFab, and then there's also a paid for version of NetFab, and I've been okay using the free version of NetFab so far. After that, I take it into KissSlicer, which is the program that I was provided with for my printer precisely, and they have a plugin for the printer, so it's got all of the little schematics in it, so I can go ahead and pick like a mechanical version of printing, and it'll be a faster print and have thicker striations when it prints, but it'll all be set up where I can pick the art level printing, which will have smaller striations and have better detail and resolution, but it takes longer and will use more filament. I can pick how hollow I want it to be, how much fill-in, if I want, a raft around it, if I want more support. There's all these little things that I can tweak depending on how I want it to print. That converts it to a G-code, which I then, sorry, too far, I throw into my printer, and the printer's like, this is gonna take 3 to 5 hours and use so many millimeters of filament. And then I just push go, and I walk away for a couple hours and hope for the best. Honestly, like 95% of my prints have ended up exactly how I want them to end up, but there's still some, especially sometimes I'll just be like, I need this random thing, go to Thingiverse, find it, throw it on my printer, hope for the best, and I'll wake up the next morning and I'm like, that's not a gun. So, it happens. Yeah. So that leads us to Pepakura, which is a nice little like a halfway point, and this is where I really started in terms of prop making. What was it, 8 years ago? Like I said, I discovered the 405th, and I wanted to be a Spartan, and so I found the program Pepakura, which is free, but you have to use a paid version to actually save the altered files. And yeah, what it does basically is it takes the 3D model, and you want a low res model basically, because the way they cut it up is like you see all these little lines on it, those are the polygons of the actual model. And so you don't want to try to fold each and every one of those little creases when they're like little tiny polygons. So you will have a certain amount of finishing work to do on this, unfortunately. So find your favorite TV show and watch it for like hours upon hours, because you're going to be sitting there. Because what it does is you take the 3D program and it converts it into like puzzle pieces that you're going to print off onto cardstock and then glue together. You can either use hot glue or super glue. Super glue can be better because when you're actually finishing this and you're sanding on it, you don't want the hot glue to get heated up by your sander or your hand or anything, and you've got hot glue all over the place, and it's not pretty and it can hurt. So after you have the whole thing constructed, there's various ways that you can finish it. The very first piece that I did fiberglass and resin because that's all I knew about. And so you go to Walmart or Home Depot or whatever, grab the fiberglass and resin, and you lay it in there, and you let it cure, and then you sand away. Years later, I found out about Smooth On, which is like heaven on earth for me, and it makes me sad that I no longer live in Dallas because they have a Smooth On place there, which is magical. And you can just get like Smooth Cast 305, which is a 2-part resin that you just mix together equally, and depending on what kind you get, it's got different cure times, and you just slush cast it on the inside, and it just forms a resin coat on the inside, and then you can like peel off the paper if you want to, or sand it, and you're left with this amazing piece. So I definitely recommend doing that if possible. I know you can order it via Amazon, and there's some other places that can carry it, some small art places possibly. So I recommend that. Didn't cover that. So model sources, there's the 405th. They cover mainly Halo-based projects, but then you'll find a lot of other, projects on there. I know that they've like branched out into like Iron Man stuff. There's the Replica Prop Forum, which is amazing. I like to stalk other prop makers on there because they'll post work in progress photos of all the stuff that they're working on, and you can just see every little detail in terms of sanding and modeling, and it's really inspirational, and then you can ask them questions and just figure out stuff for your own projects. There are Pepakura forums, English and Japanese, that people have, they upload stuff to, and then you can also rip it directly from a game too. I've done that with at least 4 or 5 games, and you can use it for Pepakura or actually 3D printing as well, depending on what route you're gonna go with it, but there are a variety of programs that you can use for ripping. You can also find sources for these models on like DeviantArt. Just type in the model, someone's probably already ripped it, and you might even be able to download it from that location. When it comes to the actual use of the program for Pepakura, it's fairly easy. You can just load up the file. It's usually going to be like an OBJ, which is it's a standard 3D model. You set the paper size for your printer, because the cardstock can come in different sizes. You can set your detail level. Make sure that you have tabs, and make sure that the tabs are numbered, because you don't want to print it out and have no way for the stuff to connect. And if you have no numbers, you're going to be sitting there like, and that's not a pretty thing to do. And like I said, find a show to marathon. When I did my first set of Halo armor, I think I watched every single episode of Futurama at least twice. Because you're gonna sit there with an X-Acto knife, just cutting it out, and then you have to fold the tabs as either a mountain or a valley so they all connect and create that shape. And I think, like, I had a helmet, a chest piece, multiple pieces on arms and legs, and it probably took me at least a good 2 to 3 months of just sitting there cutting and gluing stuff in my free time. So it's definitely a time commitment. Up next is reference for cosplay. After the most recent Dark Souls game came out, I wanted to make the goblet, and I'm still working on it. It'll be done one day. And so I modeled it in ZBrush, but when it came to the actual detailing on the piece, the in-game model that you can walk around as character is incredibly low detailed. And then the actual pre-rendered video, you can't really see anything either. So a lot of it was like, that's a squiggle there, I guess I'm gonna, but I made friends with some people on the Face Punch forum, and they're a big group of people that just download models and they use them as they will. And I believe this guy's Russian, and I'm just like, hey, can someone get me this texture? And he's like, here you go, friend. And so he got me this texture of the actual squiggles on this thing so I could make sure that I had them as accurate as possible, which is amazing. I also use modelresources.com. And here are the two programs that my boyfriend and I have used before when ripping stuff. There's Ninja Ripper and 3DX Ripper. And I won't really go into how to use them because there are a lot of tutorials online, but usually it just involves running the game. It'll rip the files out and you have to go through and look for the files. Unfortunately, a lot of these files aren't named, like, I'm looking for this gun. It's not going to be named that, unfortunately. And sometimes you need certain programs to run those too, or to convert them into programs that can run it. So that's a whole different jar of bees right there. Cool. Now, all printers are going to break. It's a fact of life. Stuff is going to happen. Sometimes when that happens, that just means that your bed's not level, or your Z height extruder is off. A lot of times when I print, if there's like just a little bit of plastic left over, when I rehome it or get ready to print, it'll hit it and stop and be like, hey, something's here, something's wrong, fix this before I can print. You can have a clogged nozzle. Funny story. I recently did the DBZ helmet for Funimation for their live action commercial that they did a couple months ago. And literally, I want to say the second to the last piece that I was printing for that helmet, my nozzle clogged up at 11 p.m. at night. And thankfully, the makerspace that they operate out of was 15 minutes down the road for me, and they're night owls, and they're there till like 2 a.m. So I drove to not the best part of town, and did like this, hey, here's $20, give me 5 nozzles, I need them now. And then drove back and spent the rest of the night printing just so I could make sure that I got this project done. Because this kind of stuff always seems to happen right in the middle of a very, very important project. Other things that can go wrong is you can have loose fittings and nuts, things need to be tightened, things need to be oiled. It is a machine. Or your model code could be wrong. There are still times where I'll convert something myself and throw it onto my printer and come back the next day, and I'll have pieces that print right for like the first inch, and then everything shifts over and then prints after that, and it's like, was there a glitch in the matrix? And then I just go back, I re-slice it on my computer, bring it back, and then print it again, and I'm just like, you do you, printer, it's okay. I've had this happen with most of the things I get from Thingiverse, unfortunately, but yeah, stuff happens. And that's my panel. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have a portfolio and an Etsy as well. Do you guys have any questions, comments? Yes?
For the Pepakura, we were talking about using silk instead of fiberglass resin.
Yes.
Which number was that exactly, and why do you prefer it over the fiberglass?
I prefer it over the fiberglass because of its ease of use. Like, I can sit there and use most smooth cast resin products without a respirator on. I can use them inside. I definitely recommend using gloves of some sort. But just ease of use, ease of finishing, and I think when it comes to the smooth cast line itself, there's like 302, 305, and 307, and the smaller the number, the faster the curing. So 305 is just generally what I use for most of my props. I believe it has a 2 to 3 minute pot life, which means that's how long it takes for it to go to a semi-solid or a pretty solid, and you can no longer pour it. And then its total cure time, I think, is like 20 to 30 minutes. But so like, yeah, if you want to be able to slush it and be able to sand it less than that, then maybe go with the 302. But check out their website. There's smoothon.com, and then specifically there's Reynolds Smoothon for up in Dallas. And I recommend just going up and visiting them. They're a great bunch of guys, and it's a great warehouse, just full of amazing things. And they have like little samples out so you can just touch and see how it feels after it's been cast. The nice thing is that they've got trial sizes, which is, I'm not good with amounts, but you can probably get a trial size, which is probably about this much liquid, for about $30. And then they sell gallons, and then they sell like 5 gallons. And so like it was $30 for this, and like maybe $80 for a gallon. And then I've never bought the 5 gallons, so I don't know the price for that one, but it's just great to just start with the trials, see what you can do with it. And then they've got other resins, like they've got an onyx, which is a already black resin. It's already got the black pigment in it, plus it's got more of a heat resistance in it as well. So that's great for Texas. They've got clear resins, you can add stuff to their resins. And it's a wonderland. I miss it so much.
What's it called again?
Smoothon?
Smoothon.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Since you have a 3D printer now, do you still do Pepakura? Okay.
If we go back to this, that and that helmet are not the same helmet. I did that out of Pepakura. Like, I modeled that, and then I did it out of Pepakura, and then it kind of just sat on the shelf for like half a year. And then I'm like, wait, I'm better with printing. I don't want to spend all my time sanding out all those grooves. Let me just print it and have less sand.
So once you go to 3D, once you go to 3D printer, you don't go back.
Yeah, it's just like, because like, I don't want to spend the time anymore sitting there putting stuff together meticulously when I can just be like, let me put these big chunks together. Like when it comes to this helmet, if you look on the inside, you can see the different sections and how they're printed. And that was a lot easier to assemble than that thing. So yeah, it's like, I guess it's like an in-between, it's a step. If you wanted to, you can go from one to the other, so.
I know you haven't used resin, but do you have any idea how to connect pieces printed in resin?
I don't honestly know much about the process. I just know that after it prints, like, then you have to put it in like its own container and use like UV to finish hardening it.
Yeah.
That's probably about it. Thankfully, the company my boyfriend works for now has one, and I hope to eventually test it and eventually get more knowledge on that one. So, anybody else? Oh, hat.
What is the biggest thing you printed and how long did it take?
I guess when it comes to size versus time, because if I print something in mechanical versus art, that can really change it. In terms of size, I've printed off a 5-foot Destiny sword before, in terms of like blade and then the little crystal and then the rest of the pommel. So I printed that off, and it was probably like that big when finished. But in terms of time, I modeled an Artorias helmet from Dark Souls last year, actually. And that was probably one of the highest resolution things I've ever printed off. And it had to be cut up into maybe a total of 20 different parts because of the print size. And it took over 100 hours for it to print in all. Yeah, that's one of those where it's like, okay, get up in the middle of the night, get it off, make sure the print bed's clean, get the next piece lined up, make sure it starts printing, go to bed, and just kind of continue that process. So, yes, sir.
For somebody who might be starting out in this area, to kind of set the right expectations getting started, how long did you feel you took to start feeling comfortable and saying, oh, okay, I've learned something, and gain the confidence to keep going, or was it instant gratification you're seeing the progress?
Well, I have to admit, like the very first time we got my printer, and it was fully assembled, we put it in my craft room, and we plugged in the Diva pistol that my boyfriend made, and we sat there and watched her print the entire thing, and we're just like, oh, and literally we're just like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And so we got it off the print bed, and it's just like, yeah. And then it hit me when I had to physically finish it by hand, which I guess I really didn't go over in terms of finishing 3D printing, but at least personally, when I finish a 3D print after putting everything together with the ABS slurry, I prefer Rust-Oleum filler primer, which is like a gray primer, and I spray that on, let it cure, usually 24 hours, because if you sand before that, you can gunk up your sandpaper, and you sand. I usually start off with 80 grit, go up to like 120, 150, and then maybe up to 220, and then after that, and between all that, I usually just keep layering on layers of this filler primer, and then after that, I go ahead and maybe switch over to like a red primer, just so I can really see the levels. And then I start wet sanding, and I go up from like 800 to 1,000 to maybe 2,000 depending on the surface. And that's the process that I did on this one. This is a 3D printed ABS 16-part sword. There's no dowel rod or anything inside of it. It's just ABS, but yeah, it's printed all the way up to, it's sanded all the way up to 2,000 grit. And then it's sprayed with a rattle can lacquer, and then I polished it with car polish. So, yeah. That's how I usually finish my props. You can also use XTC from Smooth On, which is a 2-part resin that's made specifically for finishing 3D prints that you can like mix up, and it spreads out and it fills it in, but you have to be careful because if you mix up too much of it, it's like the more you have, the faster it heats up, the faster it cures. So it's best if you like get a little pan of like tin foil, you spread it out as best you can, and then apply it to the piece. And then there's also 4K primers, which I've seen a lot of prop makers use, which fills it in even better. I think there's some people that use 4K primers and you just do 2 or 3 passes and print striations are just completely gone. But when it comes to 4K primers, they're usually primers that you have to mix up yourself, or you can get the can that has the activator on it, and you have to use the entire can up within a very limited amount of time, otherwise the can will just cure, and that'll be it. I think they're like $20 a can at the very least. So, yeah, sorry, I kind of just like off that question. Yeah, any other questions? Sir?
Someone mentioned that Autodesk has the student versions that you're interested in. Maya also has a light version that's a fraction of the cost per month.
Gotcha.
And you don't have to pretend to be a student. And it's got a lot of the fancy stuff taken out, but if you're just 3D modeling, you're not going to need to simulate air.
Gotcha. So for anybody else, if you heard that, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of ways to get around the system, depending on what you're willing to do. I know back in school, I was guilty of getting programs the wrong way, which was funny because the school actually taught us that. I didn't know how to torrent until I went to AI. And they're like, by the way, get these programs, you need them. And I was like, okay. So, with my boyfriend being a professional in the industry, we try our best to support these programs, legit, but they make so much money, you know? But I always do try to say, if you can, find a way to do it as legit as possible, guys. So, like Blender, again, is a good source. It's free, and it takes a little bit to use, but if you can master it, it's so worth it. I've used it before for work, because my company couldn't afford to get me 3ds Max, and you do what you can, man. So, anybody else? Sir.
Those, the helmet and the sword, how much in materials did that cost?
If you're talking about just the filament used, they're probably each less than $10 in filament. I get my filament from a source on Amazon where it's about $20 for a roll. It's 1.75 ABS. And I like to do it with Prime. So I'll be like, oh, I have a program, or I have a project due. Let me overnight this to myself. But yeah, it's like $20 for a roll. And again, maybe $10 each in terms of filament. So, but I guess that could lead on to like if somebody wants to commission you to print something off for them. I'm lucky that my program that I have attached to my printer actually has like a little mod to it that allows you to like calculate how much filament you're using, how much you charge for filament, how much electricity costs, how much time costs, and so you can just plug all that in and be like, oh, it's gonna cost me $50 to print this off for you. Or I can be like, I wanna charge more per hour or more for filament, here, use this instead. So it's a pretty nice thing. So a lot of people usually charge for filament plus electricity plus time. So just make friends with somebody and usually they'll just be like, here, just buy me filament. Yes. Anybody else? Sir.
Have you heard of a program called ArmorSmith?
I've heard of it, and I think I've seen it online. That's the one where like, they actually have like the body and like they. Yeah, I think I've seen that before, and I think people have been using it for Pepakura, I believe.
A panel, not at this convention, but at the test.
Yeah.
The guy that does like really big armor pieces.
Cool.
He said it was really nice because you can put a human model in there, and then you could load in whatever armor or thing you're doing, so you can kind of scale and move it.
Gotcha. That sounds nice because sometimes scaling can be really wonky when it comes to this. It's like I'm working on two Kingdom Hearts masks right now, and it's a game with the Oath Keepers or whatever, and they've got like the animal masks on it. And I specifically started working on the fox one first, and I have no idea how this happened, but the very first mask I printed was like this wide on the inside, and I'm like, whose head is that big? It's like, I have to be careful because I have a small head. It's like, my head is this, my boyfriend's head is like this, and so like, I can't try on other people's helmets, because then they'll be like, oh my god, it's way too big, and then I'll try it on him, and I'm like, wait, never mind, it's okay. But somehow I managed to screw up this helmet 3 separate times before I finally got it like printed to this commissioner's head. And I'm still finishing it, unfortunately. But it's just one of those moments that you begin to doubt yourself, because when it came to the DBZ helmet, I got done modeling and printing it, and I tried it on my head, and that was one of those moments where like, I have a week until this project is due and it doesn't fit, it's way too big, oh god. And I have to admit, I had like a little mini like freak out, and a couple tears were shed. And then like we tried it on my boyfriend's head, and with it being a DBZ character, it's supposed to be slightly like, you know, a little bit bigger. And I sent pictures to the company and they're like, this is perfect, what's wrong? And I'm like, okay, never mind, I didn't screw up on this, so yeah. I get really into it. Any other questions? Comments, concerns? Nothing? Yeah. Want to help other people through my mess ups. So, it's like I'm definitely still learning. I feel like with every project I do, I get a little bit better, I learn a little bit more. I didn't start 3D modeling until probably about 2 years ago. And I have to admit that like with my boyfriend being in the industry, he's been an amazing teacher for me. He literally has his computer right next to me, and I'll be like, hey, how do I do this thing? Instead of like sitting there and be like, tutorials, I'll be just like, Chris, and he'll be like, and then he'll do the thing, and I'm just like, thank you. You just saved me literally like 10 hours of trying to do the thing. So he is a walking 3ds Max, like encyclopedia. He knows his programs like nobody does, so it's amazing. Any other questions? Got 15 or 16 minutes left. I went through that panel a lot faster than I usually do. My apologies. Sir?
What kind of 3D printing do you have?
I have a Polyprinter 229. It's made by Polyprinter up in Dallas, and their website is just polyprinter.com. They're a good bunch of guys. I know most of them personally, and they sometimes go to conventions up in Dallas at least to show off their printer.
How much was that?
My printer was $3,000.
A wise investment, though.
And it was, I feel like it's a good investment. I'm still paying it off, but I've printed off hundreds of things off of it so far, and like I said, it's got like a 95% success rate without messing up. So I definitely like it, and it's one of the fastest printers I've seen on the market. Both both the bed and the head move together, which works for me. So I just make sure you don't put it on like a shabby table, because it will like move the table with how fast it prints, and then that messes up the print and turn. So I put mine on the floor under the desk. So I'll be sitting there working. I'm like, hey, and then the end. You had a question, sir? Oh.
So with printing, especially larger structures, have you ever encountered a weight versus directionality printing problem, or with stresses and potentially breaking along the lines?
I want to say no, because I'm very specific in terms of how I cut things before I print it. Like if I wanted to print this out, just print that. Like when I print stuff out, I don't just be like, here's the model, print it. When I print stuff out, I like to try to, like this one, you can still kind of see the print lines on it, unfortunately, it's an older project. But like if you look inside, you can see how I've sliced it so that you print things usually, I don't like to print really tall things because I'm afraid they're gonna fall over. So I usually try to keep it at a height of 4 to 5 inches max. And if it's something like this that's curved, I'll print this piece and then have like the support in the back so that I don't have to clean the support off on the front, because the support can leave some texture that's harder to clean off. So, yeah, I guess it just depends on really how you cut it. I do see a lot of people print online and they're like, I'm just gonna print this entire helmet, click, 40 hours later, and then the inside is completely full of like support beams, and that's, to me, that's kind of like, I guess, a waste of material right there. So, yeah. As you go about doing this, you learn little things in terms of how to cut it better, how things sit better. It's like this one, I can see like little pieces that I cut out, and I'm like, I wouldn't cut it like that if I ever did this helmet again. So, yeah. It's a learning experience. Anybody else? Yes.
Like, where could you get a 3D printer?
I was lucky in being in Dallas that the guys were right there, but I did still technically order it online, and you can order, you can usually order them and just have them delivered to your place. It can depend, I guess, on the size of the box and how much it's gonna cost. I was lucky that I actually went and picked up mine in person, but I know that Amazon, you can buy a lot of them there. Was it Fry's, Alltech, a lot of like those tech kind of shops sell them in person too. So, and then of course there's been not Patreons, but yeah, Kickstarters for other printers that you can order too. So, yeah, they're out there. Anybody else? Sir.
Before I was doing 3D model, and I'm sometimes writing manga stuff, but do you think that 3D model can make like manga style?
The manga style?
Like, 3D model is kind of, something about characters.
Yeah. I want to say yes. I know that a lot of like the figurines that come out of Japan now are no longer hand sculpted. They actually do them in ZBrush, and then they have them printed out, which I believe they do it via like the resin kind of printing, because that's just more detail and less finishing on that end. And some of them definitely have the money to go about that route. So yeah, 3D printing is definitely a possibility for doing figurines like that. And I've thought about doing that myself too. I want to start creating, I guess, original content so that I'm not hit by like copyright stuff. So that's definitely a goal for myself in the future. Cool. Anybody else? It's like if my friend right here wants to stand up, she has this bow, which was made by a friend of mine, Cute Monster Cosplay, and he modeled all that in Fusion 360. And then he made silicone molds of those and casted them. So that's something that is possible in Fusion 360. And I believe Harrison of Vulcan Props also modeled his own too
Yeah,
in
but it's
Fusion
a different-
360. So
It's a different boat. but-
really, it's a different boat from the game. Cool, but yes.
And his actually folds.
Yeah, his has got motion to it. But yeah, that's a possibility right there for 3D printing. So thank you for being a wonderful. It's like even in the cosplay contest yesterday, I saw a lot of people that used 3D printing in ways that I hadn't considered it myself. The Okami group, a lot of their details in terms of like the headpieces and stuff, that was all 3D printed and finished wonderfully. They actually had like kanji written on it, all 3D printed. They had like little things on their belts that were 3D printed. It was great to see 3D printing being used in, I guess, unconventional ways yesterday. So also the Sakura that won Best in Show, the flowers in her hair were 3D printed, and then she heated them and then shaped them into like a flower shape. So yeah, you don't have to just make guns and stuff. Yeah, like I made my boyfriend's nameplate for work the other day using 3D printing. He's like, make me something, and he expected me to just like write his name on a piece of paper really nice, and he comes home and I've got like this little plaque of his name 3D printed, and it's nice and thick and professional. He's like, oh. I'm like, really? You didn't? We have this. I'm gonna use it. I've printed off stuff for my walls. Like I like to hang my own props on my walls, and I have like this wand that I made. And I didn't want to buy like this big thing, so I found this like weird wire thing on Thingiverse, like you're supposed to put wires through it, and I'm like, that's the perfect size, so I printed it off, screwed it into the wall, and I just hung my little wand on it. So yeah, I have not a tack board, but the it's the board with all the holes in it.
Pegboard.
Yeah, thank you. My brain's like, it's been a long weekend. I have a pegboard, and I've printed off stuff to put in the pegboard to hold up like my scissors and my hammers and stuff too, so it's nice not to have to go out to Walmart and just buy random stuff. I'll be just like, I need this, click, walk away, come back, so yeah. Anything else? Sir?
This sounds like a very expensive hobby.
Yes.
How do you economize it, or do you economize it, or do you eat ramen, or?
I'm lucky to have a boyfriend with a full-time job, and he's been an amazing support in terms of me growing my own business. I've been Azure Props professionally for about 2.5 years now, and my goal is to continue growing as a prop maker. And like when I did the Funimation gig earlier this year, that was my very first industry job, and I want to start doing more stuff like that. I want to start working for movie companies. I want to start working for game companies. I want to start working for high-end collectors and stuff like that. So it's been, I will not say that I make a lot of a profit. A lot of the money I do make does go back into the business in terms of materials and electricity and rent and all that stuff. I do keep all of my receipts. I have a friend who is an auditor who's been a great help. But when it came time to buy the printer, that was a very big step, because that's a lot of money to throw down on something like that. And I've seen that when it comes to the actual, I wouldn't say industry, or I wouldn't say hobby either, because you've got a lot of people that really straddle the line when it comes to prop making, that I feel like if I hadn't gotten into 3D printing in the past 1.5 years, I would have been left behind. Because literally everybody that I look up to and works in the industry is 3D printing in some capacity right now, and it helps them in terms of quality and accuracy and time. Because instead of just layering down pieces of sinter or styrene, you can model it, literally make it perfect, and then print it and finish it, which can be a time saver. There's also the whole thing about weight, and I don't know, I guess depending on how much money you want to spend on it, that's the size of the printer that you get. Mine was supposed to be a business investment, and so that's why I went for something so expensive. And I do not regret it by any means. I'm incredibly happy, and I would love to get a second printer eventually too, one of the resin ones. So yeah, otherwise I'd say like stick with one of those like $500 printers. Or there's those ones that you can basically build yourself that can start off less than $100. So yeah, money. just money. Anything else?
And I also heard that you are working at a game company.
Um,
So game company.
I was gonna say, like, you're talking about me working for a game company. I want to be able to do a lot of what like Harrison does and finish props, and I want to start, or even impact props. I want to help game companies make their IPs real for like conventions and other cosplayers to wear, and for in-studio exhibition kind of stuff. That's my goal.
And I want to ask, first I want to ask that you, and in the they have PlayStation 4 Pro and like Xbox One, do you think the 3D model will be more strong, will be more high quality?
Mm-hmm.
In the future, like getting high quality, do you think still won't get?
Oh yeah, they'll continue to get more and more high quality. Even in the 5 years that I've been with my boyfriend, in terms of watching how models have gotten better. A lot of companies use this program now called Substance, which allows for programmatic texturing, which is amazing. If you've seen the Order 1880 and most recent Nathan Drake games, those are all done with Substance, and those are higher end textures. They're doing 4K textures. As processors and PCs get more and more powerful, they can load more and more polygons, basically. And so instead of having like N64 era games where you've got like 100 polygon character on stage, you can now have millions upon millions of polygons. Though a lot of the detail that they do put into those characters are actually just flat textures. Like if you think you're seeing pores or something, those aren't actually like pores. It's like, I challenge you guys, like next time you guys play like I feel like I had like this illusion broken for me when I started dating my boyfriend, that I'd look at games and be like, everything's so pretty. And now like I play a game and I'll look at this wall and I'll be like, look at all this amazing texture on it. And then you turn and you look at it and it's completely flat in terms of like the actual polygon. And it's all just the way the normal map hits and depth map. And there's a lot of terms for stuff that I didn't understand at first. So in like short, yes, models are gonna get better and just more beautiful as time goes on. So.
Because I saw the notes and I thought most of the really good, but still I think still they can go on to iOS.
Yeah, I think eventually they're gonna get to the point where you've got like movie level models, that kind of stuff, where it takes rendering farms to get stuff ready. Instead of it just being like rendered on like a little PC, it takes multiple servers is what they're using in movies now, but maybe we'll be able to crunch that down. Who knows? There's been some absolutely beautiful games coming out in the past 6 months that like 5-6 years ago I would have been like, that's not a game. Where did that come from? So, cool. 3 minutes left? Anything else? Well, I think if you guys want to come up and like touch this stuff and pick it up, and I've got a business card if you guys ever want to like send me questions or anything.